Deputy Michael Conaghan, sharing with Deputy Anne Phelan, 5 minutes each.
Thank you, Concoila. I'm delighted to support the motion before the House today, which proposes a constitutional amendment to recognise and enshrine the rights and voice of children in Bunrock-Naheran. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Minister Fitzgerald and her staff for her work and commitment to date. A constitutional amendment of any nature is no small matter. Each word must be carefully chosen, each sentence carefully constructed, as there is no doubt that the wording will be tested again and again in our courts. It is essential that the wording not create any anomalies, any loopholes, or any circumstances in which the intended rights of the child cannot be fully vindicated. I commend the Minister, her staff and the Attorney General and those who offered their advice in this matter for their efforts to date. I'm proud as a Labour Party member of the Dáil to be supporting the delivery of another commitment made by the Labour Party in its manifesto and reaffirmed in the programme for national government. This amendment will expressly recognise children in their own right within the Constitution. It will strengthen the protection of children from abuse and neglect, putting their best interests on a constitutional footing at the heart of the decision-making process. The need for this constitutional amendment has been apparent for some time and has been called for by various bodies and expert reports going back 20 years, for example, to the time of Judge Catherine McGuinness's report on the Kilkenny incest case. The recommendations of that report, submitted to the then Minister for Health, Brendan Howlin, in 1993, stated, quote, "We believe that the Constitution should contain a specific and overt declaration of the rights of born children," end of quote. 19 years later, we're finally delivering. As I mentioned, I'm glad to see that this proposed amendment has gained almost unanimous support and that every party in the House is backing it. This amendment is building on the extensive work of the All-Party Joint Committee on the Constitutional Amendment on Children, chaired by Mary O'Rourke, which reported in 2010, and I'm glad to see this cross-party support on this matter continue through to the referendum. The need for action has been brought into stark light by Ireland's quite sad history of protection of our children. The Ryan Commission, the Cloyne Report, Roscommon, the Independent Child Death Review, and many, many more form a damning litany of abuse, neglect, and failure to protect our children. As the Children's Rights Alliance state in their submission, this referendum will allow us, quote, "set out how we, as a country, now view and value children and move beyond the damning history of child abuse in Ireland," end of quote. With this referendum, we have the opportunity to create a new legacy for Ireland and our children. Ireland ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Children in 1992. 20 years later, we are now putting some of those general principles of that convention into effect. For example, the best interest of the child, the right of the child to be heard, and the non-discrimination principle. According to the wording of the proposed amendment, in proceedings, quote, "brought by the state for the purpose of preventing the safety and welfare of any child from being prejudicially affected, or concerning the adoption, guardianship, or custody of, or access to any child, the best interests of the child shall be the paramount consideration." The Constitution will now take a child-centred approach to the protection of children. Adoption, guardianship, custody, access, all these decisions will now be based on the best interests of the child. This referendum does not amend Article 41 of the Constitution and will therefore do nothing to undermine the constitutional role of the family. What it will do is give constitutional standing to the interests of the child and allow a judge to properly consider the interests of the child. Furthermore, I am particularly glad to see that the proposed amendment will see the voice of the child, the right of the child, to have their views heard, enshrined in the Constitution. The views of the child will now be given due weighting by a judge alongside their best interests in cases of safety, welfare, adoption, guardianship, and other areas. Finally, I'd like to welcome the fact that this amendment will allow for full and proper equality amongst children, regardless of their background. It provides that the rights and protections enjoyed by children are to be enjoyed by all children, irrespective of their parents' marital status. This will be particularly important in the area of adoption, where, for example, the Supreme Court has found that the Constitution as it stands puts barriers in the way of adoption of children of married parents. This referendum and the adoption amendment bill now published will level that playing field. The issue of equality is a core principle for many of us, and all of us indeed. And this constitutional amendment will help further enshrine this commitment in the law in relation to children. In this regard, I'd also like to commend Mr. Rory Quinn for his work in the Department of Education to create a proper playing field in terms of access to and quality of our children's education. I hope this will continue through the budget in 2013. In conclusion, I'd like to conclude by saying that I'm looking forward to taking this doorsteps of Ballyfermot and Inchicore Commitment and beyond in support of this referendum. The response to date has been most positive, but my party colleagues and I will continue to work to ensure that this most important referendum will be carried so that the rights of the child can be fully and properly enshrined in our Constitution in perpetuity. Thank you,
Thank you, Deputy.